reaches, that ball's out, that's live! Back the other way, Sam Hubbard! The Cincinnati Kid! Hubbard's got a convoy! Chased by Andrews! At the 30, the 20, he will score!
To the end zone, down the field, and it is deflected, and gone! Touchdown! A.J. Green!
Over goes back to throw, men are coming late, looks right down the middle, there's Eddie Brown, he has it at the 35 to the 30, he may go, 10-5, touchdown!
Now the Bengals Super Bowl chances rest on his right foot. The kick is up.
Yeah.
It is good.
Corey Dillon, he's gone. The knockout punch, you're looking at it. 65 yards.
And they're back to throw as the blitz is on. Goes long, intended for Collinsworth. He has it down to the 20, touchdown! And Chris Collinsworth.
Throwing the long ball. Deep down the field. Johnson's got it. Touchdown. Cincinnati.
Look at Chase go! Oh my goodness, what a gear he just found! Chase for the touchdown! Wow, Chase is on the case!
It is no fluke. It is a fact. The Cincinnati Bengals are headed to Super Bowl 56. The play clock at 3. Shotgun snap. Carr throws into traffic. Intercepted. Germaine Pratt has the football.
Yeah.
Coffin nails.
Bam, bam, bam! How about that?
Oh no. I'm all frazzled.
Oh no.
What a bad game from the Bengals, and they're in my head. I'm not feeling great. But here Craig joins me for the post game. Another loss, something we're getting a little too comfortable doing. But Craig, I would ask you how you're doing, but a 20-point home loss in uniforms you've never lost in before, that certainly doesn't feel great.
Well, the Bengals are who we thought they were. And whether you wanted to admit it or not, I think deep down we all knew what this team really was. I think some of us wanted to gain some hope after the last 2 weeks with wins over really bad teams. But the truth of the matter is that this team just isn't that good. They haven't really been that good all year long. And so, we went into this one. I had, outside hopes of maybe competing. And then, those of us in the central time zone, we wake up to the news that T. Higgins is not likely to go, which was confirmed later on. And it just, ever from that moment forward, it felt like it was going to be a difficult uphill climb. And, there were certain moments in this game where you felt like maybe you were wrong. Maybe you were wrong. Maybe Zach Taylor could scheme open Jamar Chase and get him going in a game. Maybe Zach Taylor could figure out how to be explosive with only one real weapon on his team. Didn't pan out that way. Jamar Chase, obviously, with his 9 catches for 54 yards, only 6 yards per reception. We're going to get into all of that and more. At the end of the day, this just isn't a very good ball club. And the decision that you have to make is whether or not Zach Taylor is the guy to lead you forward. And quite frankly, you can't continue to waste Joe Burrow prime years. And you got to make a decision on what's going to happen there. And, give up what did end up being 37 points to the Eagles after they had back-to-back. Yeah, after they've struggled a little bit offensively. Jalen Hurts with 3 rushing touchdowns today. That tush push, as we talked about before, is really tough to stop. But just as you can imagine, a little bit deflating today. Not necessarily a surprise, but I think the surprise is how bad it looked outside of that first drive.
And that first drive was incredible. It was incredible.
I know.
For the third week
in a row, I had a lot of people chirping at me after that first drive, Jacob, yourself included.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. I thought we fixed the problem, and we didn't.
No. And here's the thing, right? Like, it was talked about during the week as well. Like Philadelphia, they don't give up big plays. It's just not what they do. They play a lot of cloud defense, a lot of cloud coverage, and they try to contain you to short gains and want you to beat them by 1,000 cuts. And the Bengals did exactly that on that first drive. That first drive was exactly what the Bengals needed to do. 17 plays, 70 yards, over 10 minutes of ball control. And you thought, wow, this is going to go well. Didn't go well after that, Jacob. And
No.
I don't want to jump the gun here, so I'm going to stop there. I'll let you any thoughts that you have right out the gate, kind of bring them to you. But I don't know. I'm not as surprised as I thought I would be.
No, and I think that's fair. I think the surprise for me doesn't come from the Eagles offense scoring 37 or the Bengals losing to a team that I think is pretty good and without debate talented in the Philadelphia Eagles. The surprise comes in a 20-point blowout loss where you really weren't in the game down the stretch, which is so frustrating to say. The offense just disappeared, and that's exactly what we're going to get to. I'm jumping the gun after you just said you weren't going to jump the gun, so I'll stop jumping the gun. I'm a mess right now, man. I thought this was going to be the game that the Bengals were going to get back on track, prove that these last two wins over the Giants and the Browns weren't a fluke, weren't just a product of playing teams at the bottom of the league, prove that they're legit, prove that they've changed some things, and today they prove exactly that they did not do that these things have not changed, and the same issues that we used to face in the beginning of the season, we are still facing. In sports, when you say someone is back, that's usually a good thing. That's usually a massive positive. At this point, all I could think all day was, oh, well, the Bengals defense is back, and I certainly don't mean that as a good thing. These last 2 weeks are a massive outlier at this point. This is what the Bengals defense is. And now they're back to that level of production. 37 points against an Eagles offense, like Craig said, that has struggled recently, is unacceptable. Saquon Barkley ran for 5 yards a carry, and that's with the middle chunk of the game where he really didn't do anything. Beginning of the game and end of the game, when the Eagles were trying to run the ball to establish the run at the beginning and salt the clock away at the end, he got every yard he wanted every time he touched the ball. There was zero fight from the interior of this Bengals defense against the run when it came to Saquon Barkley. Then we saw Will Shipley break a touchdown run called back because of a hold. Kenneth Gainwell got in on the action with a 12-yard run. It didn't matter who the Eagles put back there. Anyone could run on the Bengals, and it's a problem that we've faced all year, something that we thought was going to be a bigger problem at the beginning of the year. Those concerns were qualmed a little bit by how we were able to bottle up Derrick Henry in the regulation of that Ravens game. But today in this one, the running attack for the Eagles was just so good. I mean, Jalen Hurts, 10 carries for 37 yards, but even those 37 yards felt timely. Felt like he was getting those runs when he needed to keep the offense on the field. It's just the Bengals defense just can't do enough. And at some point, I don't know how much I can blame the coaching, because we've seen so many different guys out there now that can't do it or are lost. How many times was Cam Taylor-Britt 10 yards behind DeVonta Smith or A.J. Brown, whoever he was covering? I can think of at least 3 off the top of my mind, and I haven't even watched film yet. This defense doesn't know where to line up or how to play fundamental football, it seems like. Jordan Battle, a guy that I've begged for more snaps all year long, finally gets a little TV time, and it's with DeVonta Smith picking the ball off the top of his helmet in the back of the end zone. I mean, just incredibly unfortunate for this Bengals team in a spot where you had a chance to prove that you've changed things, that you've made adjustments, that this coaching staff is legitimate and cares about winning a championship this year and have done what they needed to do in this locker room to get these guys on track. And I don't know if it's a talent problem or a coaching problem, but there's big-time problems in Cincinnati. I think it does start with the defense, even though the offense only put up 17 points today and put the defense in some bad positions. But, man, what I thought I saw the last 2 weeks out of this Bengals defense, out the window. We're back to where we were a few weeks ago.
Well, we talked about how the Eagles can beat you in so many different ways. And we talked about, do you want to let Saquon beat you? Do you want to try and force Jalen Hurts to beat you? What do you want to do? And what happens? Saquon Barkley, 22 carries, 108 yards, 4.9 a pop. Jalen Hurts, 10 carries, 37 yards, 3 touchdowns on the ground. Oh, by the way, Jacob, you decided you wanted Jalen Hurts to beat you in the air.
I know.
What did he do today?
I know. He beat me in the air. Okay, Craig? He beat me in the air.
16 for 20, 236 yards, and that deep touchdown pass to DeVonta Smith. Again, I thought Jordan Battle had pretty good coverage in that, but DeVonta Smith just able to pick it out of the air and make it work. DeVonta Smith, 6 catches, 85 yards, including that 45-yard touchdown. A.J. Brown, 5 catches for 84, 16.8 pop per pop. Grant Calcaterra, 3 catches for 58 yards. You know, you go on and on about the different ways that this Eagles team can beat you, and the Bengals didn't feel like they stopped any of them. And I think that if you would have come into this and talked about, oh, well, let's shut down Saquon and let Jalen Hurts beat us. And if Jalen Hurts beats us when we hold Saquon Barkley to 50 yards on the ground or something like that, fine, so be it. You throw your hands up in the air and you say, okay, we did what we wanted to do, and they turned around and they beat us at our own game. If you say, okay, well, we don't want to let Jalen Hurts beat us, and so we're going to stop him and let Saquon Barkley run wild, and throw your hands up, and if they happen to do it, then so be it. But what happened today was that everybody beat you.
Yeah.
There wasn't a single facet of the game defensively where you can look at it and say, yeah, you know what? I feel like the Bengals really stepped up in that area. There wasn't any of them. And so the defense is back to where it was. You know, that Giants game, we talked about how you want to make Daniel Jones beat you. And guess what? Daniel Jones wasn't able to beat you.
Yeah.
The Browns game last week, you wanted to make them beat you through the air. They couldn't beat you through the air. And so now here you are. You had a team that can beat you in both facets. You couldn't stop either one of them. And you're looking at a 37-point blowout from a defensive perspective, and it's just not good enough.
And that's, I think, where I'm at right now with the defense is what are the building blocks? What is there left to take away? What is there to hold on to hope-wise for the rest of the year on that side of the ball? I mean, are we talking about a complete overhaul next year on that defense if we're trying to compete? I can't point to a ton of guys that I'm confident in their current role. I mean, Cam Taylor-Britt hasn't looked like a corner one all year. The linebackers have shown flashes of being fine. I think I'll probably leave the two of them out. Today, Trey Hendrickson, certainly not calling to move on from him or anything, but a game I expected him to make a massive difference, lined up against the Eagles' backup left tackle, Fred Johnson, and he was nowhere to be seen. Really, the entire Bengals pass rush was nowhere to be seen all day long, and I think that was kind of to be expected on the right-hand side. Lane Johnson has only allowed one pressure all year long. He's the only tackle in NFL football with over 100 pass blocking snaps and less than 5 pressures allowed, so it's not necessarily on Sam Hubbard and that side of the line that they weren't getting pressure today. Everyone has had those struggles, but for Trey Hendrickson not to get pressure off of Fred Johnson, and for that middle of the defense not to succeed against a guy in Cam Jurgens, their new center after Jason Kelsey's retirement, who's in his first year starting, Landon Dickerson at guard. The guard, I'm forgetting his name, out of Alabama, the rookie this year, Tyler Steen, not a great player by any means, and the interior defensive line for the Bengals unable to get any kind of pressure whatsoever, unable to make a difference against the run. The secondary doesn't look great. There's not a lot of encouraging pieces there. I don't know what to hold on to at this point on that side of the football. And if you're going to make that many changes, or as many changes as I think are going to be made, then why keep the same coaches around? Why keep Lou around if you're going to overhaul the whole defense? Make a change there. Bring in a new mind with the new bodies. And then if you're talking about him leaving, why don't we talk about changing everyone in the coaching staff? I think that's kind of where all the Bengals fans are at right now is you can't change 53 players. There's a 53-man roster in the NFL. I think there's a lot of holes. I think there's probably a handful of guys a lot of Bengals fans are really confident in. But you can't change 40-plus players on a roster. The easiest thing to change is the coaching staff. And I think that's kind of where we're headed right now because there's way too many problems to point to anything else other than an entire roster overhaul or the coaching staff. And I think the first thing you do is you hope that a new system and a new coaching staff can save you some of the money and draft capital you've already poured into this defense.
Yeah, I look around and I'm checking out PFF instant reports here and trying to see kind of how things go. I think one of the things that stands out to me, I mean, obviously you think you have some cornerstones with Logan Wilson and some other guys on this defense, but your supposed number one corner, Cam Taylor-Britt, is the most targeted guy on your defense.
Yeah.
That tells you a little bit about your number one corner. And today he gives up 5 catches on 7 targets for 64 yards, 3 first downs. I mean, again, for a game in which the Eagles only threw the ball 20 times, for over a third of those to go towards your supposed number one corner, tells you a lot about where this team is defensively versus, when you look at the Eagles matchup, Darius Slay was targeted 6 times, but only gave up 3 catches, So I don't know. It just, I think there's so many different pieces that need to be addressed. There were pieces that needed to be addressed this offseason that we knew needed to be addressed that weren't addressed. There were pieces that a lot of people didn't think that the depth was there. And whether you want to blame Zach Taylor and this coaching staff, whether you want to blame Duke Tobin and this front office, it doesn't really matter where the blame goes right now. At the end of the day, this team is not good enough. You can't expect them to compete for a playoff spot this year. They're sitting now at 3-4. They're 0-3 at home, and just not a whole lot of hope when you look at it.
The painful thing about the other side of the ball as well, obviously 37 points, never an expectation, but with the weapons the Eagles have, certainly knew it was a possibility against this Bengals defense that we've seen give up this kind of production before. So that's not the biggest shock, but 17 points from this offense is, because every game so far this season that they've been asked to score to stay in the game, they've been able to do so. The Bengals haven't been blown out this year. That's just a fact. They've been able to hang around in most games, even games that felt like they were out of reach. I mean, that Commanders game felt like we got whooped up and down the field the entire time in primetime, lost the game by 5. This game, honestly, it felt like we were dominating the game most of the first half, and you lose by 20. It's just the fickleness of the NFL is crazy, because this offense, maybe there were bigger issues in the last 2 weeks than I wanted to admit. I mean, 17 points against the Giants, a touchdown late in that one, and then 21 points against the Browns. Just not great. 21 points against the Browns, one of those touchdowns being a kick return touchdown, and then 17 points this week for the offense. Do we have an offensive problem? But then I see drives like that first drive that's so clinical. Bang, 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 right down the field. Everything that Joe wants to do, he gets done, finds the open receiver, 3rd and 7, doesn't matter, convert it, 5 for 5 on third down conversions, touchdown to start the game on a good play design with Jamar Chase motioning out of the backfield. And then the offense scores 10 points the rest of the day? What happened to this offense, and where did it go? I know an expectation of 30 points a game is not feasible, and I'm not even acting like they should have scored 40 and won this one. I'm saying 1 more touchdown, 2 more touchdowns. How do you disappear for so long in an NFL football game? I understand the 2 turnovers at the end, which really make this look worse than it might actually be, but that's part of the game as well. And when you're playing for pride, especially on that Mike Gesicki drive, to just lose the ball so carelessly, just reaching out away from your body when you're nowhere near the first down marker or any reason to be reaching it out. Zach Bond punches it away. It feels like there's a lack of pride on this team, and these guys, I don't know if they don't care or what, but it felt like today that they threw in the towel fairly early.
Yeah, let's go back to the missed field goal. And I know we've got Evan McPherson on the rundown coming up, but you've got that missed field goal towards the end of that first half, and you go from potentially a 13-3 lead. The Eagles go 2 for 1, which we've talked about multiple times on this show, and the Bengals going 2 for 1. The Eagles go 2 for 1, and next thing you know, it's 17-10 Eagles. Now the Bengals respond. They go 13 plays, 70 yards, 6 minutes and 20 seconds, and they tie it up 17-17. But then what happens? The Eagles respond, they score again, and then we get to the dreaded turnover on downs. And this is where I keep continuing to go back to every single time we talk about this offense, is that when they need it the most, they have zero capability of running the football. And they did it again during that drive there, 3rd down and 1. They run Zach Moss up the middle for no gain. And then Zach Taylor, with a classic Zach Taylor call, gives the ball to Jamar Chase 3 yards behind the line of scrimmage and hopes that he can go 3-on-1 to gain 4 yards and get the first down. And it's just an incomprehensible play call to me when this Bengals offense should have so many opportunities to take advantage of this defense in multiple ways. Yeah. And so you run the ball on 3rd down, you can't do anything with it. You throw to Jamar Chase behind the line. Next thing you know, field goal from the Eagles gives them a 10-point lead, and now you're feeling like, oh man, this one's really getting away from you. Joe Burrow takes a shot down the field, which I don't think any of us blame him for taking a shot down the field. It was a great play by the Eagles defense. But now 27-17 with the Eagles getting the ball back, and it just feels like it's completely over at that point. And it all goes back, and it started with the missed field goal from Evan McPherson. And so I keep going back to the Bengals' inability to run the ball.
Right.
And we've talked about this week after week, time after time. You know, the Bengals started this game with Zach Moss and Andre Yoshivas and Trenton Irwin on the field. Zach Moss today, 5 carries for 11 yards. Chase Brown, 12 carries for only 32. His long run of 5 yards. When Joe Burrow has your longest run of the day for 8 yards, it's probably not a very good day on the ground. 20 total carries for this Bengals offense, 2.9 yards per pop is never going to get it done. And it just felt like right off the bat, they abandoned the run. Now on that first drive, they weren't overly successful with it, but on that first drive, they carried the ball 5 times.
Yeah.
So five times you carry the ball in your first drive of the game, and then the rest of the game you carry it 15 times.
Yeah. No, it's
I don't know. It just
ridiculous.
doesn't feel like it makes sense.
I don't think they care about running the football, and I firmly believe that. I think Zach Taylor doesn't think running the football matters. All right, that's the only explanation at this point, because you're not only not running it enough, in my opinion, you're not running it in situations that give them a legitimate chance to succeed either. Plenty of opportunities to get more creative running the ball. We're handing it off to Zach Moss on an outside zone behind Cody Ford and Cordell Volson. I get that that's where you normally run when Orlando Brown's in the game. I get that. You have to be smarter as a play caller to know that he's not in the game. And now you have to run behind Kappa and Mims. There is no reason to consistently be giving these running backs the ball behind Cody Ford. It's so frustrating because if I'm sitting here seeing it in real time, I don't understand why they can't think of it too. How do you continue to run the ball to that side of the line when it doesn't work time after time after time? Run the ball the other way. We get to 3rd and 1. What's the play call? Bam! Zach Moss right up Cody Ford's backside. Gets blown up in the backfield. And then we run a bubble screen, which is the worst play call of all time. I don't get it. I don't get it. And that's the part about being a football fan that frustrates me the most right now with this team. I don't understand why we are doing so many of the things we are doing. And that's why it's so frustrating, is because it feels like there's a lot of easy fixes. And it might just sound easy. Maybe we don't have the talent to do certain things. Maybe we don't have the pieces to make halftime adjustments. Maybe these guys in the defensive back end don't know what to do. Maybe Chase Brown can't carry the ball 20 times a game like he did at Illinois just fine. But I don't know why we aren't making changes. We continue to run out there and do the same thing week after week on both sides of the ball. These last 2 weeks, did it work on defense? Sure. Was it against the Browns and Giants? Yes. The offense has struggled 2 weeks in a row. Did they make any changes this week? Nope. T. Higgins out. We see Germaine Burton make one play down the sideline, 40-yard catch. Great. Do we see him the rest of the game? Nope. Andre Yoshivas, nothing. Just a dropped, wide open first down conversion. These receivers, I mean, Mike Gesicki led the team in receiving today. 7 catches for 73 yards. Probably his best game in a Bengals uniform, having to step up when we needed it most. And then right at the end of the game, pisses it away by fumbling the ball on the last drive. There's just no consistency from anyone on this team other than 9-1. And that's it. That's really what it comes down to. There's no one else you can rely on. And at some point, I'm going to have to remove those guys from it too. I mean, Jamar Chase had a great first drive of the game, first couple drives of the game, but really disappeared at the end. And Joe Burrow, there's a lot of talk in our chat, and I'm going to have to look into it more before we prepare for our show on Tuesday. A lot of talk in our chat about a lot of bad audibles for Joe Burrow today. So something that I think is going to be interesting to take a look at, complaining about multiple checks going on today, which is something that takes us back to the Ravens discussion, checking into a run in overtime, something that has been a big-time conversation about Joe Burrow this whole year has been the audible situation. So certainly something that's going to be interesting to look at there. But offensively for this team, it's painful because I don't know what changes there are to make. The thought process is every year from here on out, we're going to get less talented on that side of the ball.
Well, I said this early on in the year. Let's say that you get your wish and that Zach Taylor is relieved of his duties as head coach. Who's your next head coach?
Right.
Jacob. It's Darren Simmons. So I hope you're ready for that, because Darren Simmons hasn't really done a whole lot in his 20 years with the Bengals either. So, I mean, there's not a great answer from a personnel standpoint. There's not a great answer from a coaching standpoint. If they're certainly not going to put Lou Anarumo in that role right now with the way this defense is playing. Dan Pitcher is your first-year offensive coordinator. I doubt that you're going to put him in this position. And so you're left in a scenario where if you do make a change, you're putting in Darren Simmons in a lose-lose situation for this team. And so, yeah, to your point, Jamar Chase came out, had a great first drive. Joe Burrow on that drive, 11 for 12, 60 yards, 5 third-down conversions, 4 different players caught a ball. I mean, they were looking great. Didn't pan out the rest of the way. The Bengals offense seemed to completely lose sight of what its goal was during this game, which was death by 1,000 cuts. And they completely changed their approach. And it just didn't work out for them yet again. And if we want to add a little salt to the wound, not to dig in there too much right now, but the Cleveland Browns just beat the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah.
So your
this win would have been awesome.
Should have been 4-3 Bengals would have been only a half a game back of the Ravens for the division lead.
Playing them in 2 weeks.
Yep. So here we are yet again with a.
Every time this Bengals team gets extended a little bit of rope this year after their slow start, they just throw it away. Every single time they've been given a little glimpse into the open door, crack the door a little bit for the AFC playoffs, they just throw it away.
Yep. Frustrating. And I see someone in the chat saying that both coaches in Baltimore and Pittsburgh were special teams coaches, but I don't know how familiar you are with Darren Simmons' game, but
right.
But
not the same.
I think it's a little bit different, but what do I know? There's a reason that Darren Simmons has been with the Bengals now since I don't know what year, 1998 it feels like.
It's when Tobin got here.
Get this answer really quick. I mean, it probably I don't doubt it.
Tobin started in 99.
Joined the Bengals in 2003, 20 years.
21 years. Yeah, that's something. Reed Mouse, our friend of the program, Reed Mouse, Chatterbox extraordinaire, puts a great point in the chat. What this team lacks in good players, it more than makes up for the fact that they are also poorly coached. So, a great point by Reed there. Really, it is a lack of talent on both sides of the football. We have a lot of guys on defense that just aren't good enough, and this offensive line is the least athletic offensive line by any metric you can find to measure athleticism in the entire league. And they're poorly coached. That's a hell of a combination, causes some kind of exponential decrease there to how bad it looks on the field, and that's what reared its ugly head today. We talked about a lot over the season. What happens if that bad offense and the bad defense find each other on the same day? Well, folks, we found it. We found it, and it happened today at 1 p.m. Thank God this puppy was flexed and there weren't more eyes on it, because it was an ugly one that I'm sure is still going to be talked about quite a bit. Something else that is not fun but does need to be talked about is the most expensive kicker in Bengals history. One of the most expensive kickers in NFL history, Evan McPherson, who has yet to make a 50-yard field goal this season. Obviously, the kick against the Ravens, talked about a lot. The play calling decision to run that 3 times, kick it. A messed up hold on that one caused it to be missed. This one today, there was some sentiment about a bad hold. It looked fine to me. The operation looked like it was clean to me. Looked like one McPherson should have made. Has not made a 50-yarder yet this year. I think it's close to getting to a point where we're going to have a conversation about McPherson. He's second to last in the league in field goal percentage this year. That's unacceptable for a guy that you drafted and then extended and paid big-time money to be the kicker of your future. The fact that we have so many people in the chat after that missed field goal saying you have to go for that ball or go for that 4th down, 4th and 7 early in the game with a lead, saying you have to go for that, tells me we have a problem with our kicker. Because if 4th and 7, a 53-yard field goal, and you have the most expensive kicker in football, and you have no confidence in kicking that field goal, then you made a bad decision extending that kicker. And I did have confidence running him out there. That's a play that I am confident in Evan McPherson making. At some point, I'm going to lose that confidence. I don't know how much longer I can hold on to a 2021 playoff run where he didn't miss. This guy hasn't been great since then. He's been fine. He's been above average. He hasn't been the nails lights out great kicker really since that playoff run, which is really startling to see as that sample size continues to grow of struggles.
Yeah, his first 2 seasons in the NFL, 14 of 16 on kicks from 50-plus yards. You mentioned it, hasn't made one yet this year. 10 of his last 18 from 50-plus. And then you mentioned it's second worst field goal percentage in the NFL for a guy that you're paying $5.5 million a year. And just not good enough. 3 straight now from over 50 he's missed. I mean, this is a guy who earned his way to this contract with making long kicks. And in a league now where it feels like 50 to 60 yarders are chip shots for many kickers now, to have
at least the ones getting paid as much as he is
out there. Yeah. To have a kicker that you can't put out there and rely on in that situation to make a field goal when the snap was good, the hold looked good, and he just hooks it left. I mean, that's a difficult situation to be in. And the other piece of it that has to be addressed is that Zach Taylor continues to put his team in situations where he seemingly is playing to put the ball on Evan McPherson's foot from long distance. And that also doesn't make a ton of sense to me. And so you're paying a guy $5.5 million. He's got to make that kick. And it just spiraled from there. I talked at the beginning of the show. After that kick, things just went downhill for the Bengals, and it went downhill quick.
No, you're absolutely right. And just more salt in that wound. Let's just keep pouring salt in the wounds, Craig. Jake Elliott, the Eagles kicker, 39-yarder, 47-yarder, 49-yarder. If you know anything about Jake Elliott, that's right. Signed by the Bengals and cut in favor of everyone's favorite, Fat Randy. Fat Randy was who Zach and company picked over Jake Elliott, who's now one of the best kickers in the entire NFL in Philadelphia. So just more salt in the wound there when this game obviously took a big-time turn after that missed field goal. I've said it time and time again, this was the game for the Bengals to prove that they've made changes. This was the chance for the Bengals to prove that they're a legitimate team. We should take them seriously in playoff conversations. And now I guess the question is, what now? I guess they have another one of these games in 2 weeks. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I just saw it on social media. I think it's really important for us to address before we move on to what now. In his post-game press conference, Joe Burrow says, quote, "It's frustrating that year after year the Bengals have short yardage issues." We talked about it before. Make of it what you want, but they haven't been able to run the ball when they need to run the ball. They haven't been able to make the play calls when they need to make the play calls. Whether that's a shot at Zach Taylor, whether that's a shot at the running game. It has to be,
right?
Whether that's a shot at himself, I don't know. You can make of it what you want. As Kelsey Conway put it, make of that what you please. All I know is that the short yardage game has been unbearable.
Oh, yeah.
And it's been that way for years. So whether you want to blame the running game because of Zach Moss, whether you want to go back in time and blame the running game of Joe Mixon, whether you want to blame this offensive line, whether you want to blame Zach Taylor, whether you want to blame Joe Burrow himself for potentially audibling into those calls that we don't know. Blame who you want to blame. But the short story is that this team has not been good in short yardage situations, and that has to be fixed because this is a team that time and time again faces short yardage situations. So, you know, whether it's the Eagles, who you just played, who had 5 of 6 successful tush pushes. Yeah. Was it 5 of 6? I don't remember.
I don't know if he got in on that touchdown, but we lost by 20, so I'm not going to argue.
I don't know. Yeah, I'm not going to lie. I was taking my daughter to swim lessons today, so I was watching on my phone. Hard to tell on my phone.
They put the replay up on the broadcast and circled his elbow as the ball.
Right. Yeah.
So no, I don't know. But you know, I was ready to get mad about that if it wasn't going to be a 20-point loss. I was ready to get upset about that overturn.
Yeah. Well, what I do know is regardless of whether that was a touchdown or not, the Eagles are time and time again successful at picking up 1 yard, and they're somehow doing it with a play that nobody else in the league runs.
Right.
And so here you are, you've got Joe Burrow, who whether we want to admit it or not, is a fairly athletic quarterback. He may not be Jalen Hurts. He may not be Lamar Jackson, but he's athletic enough to run for 47 yards and a touchdown a week or two ago. I would like to believe that he's athletic enough to pick up 1 yard on a QB sneak if you give him the chance. But this just not going to happen when you have an offense where he's in shotgun every single time. So, look, I've been critical of the shotgun. I've been critical of just Zach Taylor. I've been critical of a lot of things. It probably not going to change this year.
Right.
But the end of the story is that when you have 3rd and 1 and you run 2 plays and can't convert it, that is a huge momentum swing, and the Bengals weren't able to overcome it today.
Joe Burrow has been successful on the quarterback sneak as well. I understand. I mean, myself and I'm sure Zach Taylor and everyone else on that Bengals sideline holds their breath every time that pile is unpiling on top of him. I don't love seeing it happen, but at a point in the game like that where you absolutely have to get that 3rd down, you're inside a yard. Run the quarterback sneak. I don't understand the trying to get cute and hit it off to Zach Moss behind your worst lineman that's in the game and then a bubble screen. I feel like it's too creative and too, I don't want to say soft, but protective of Burrow to not be willing to run that QB sneak there, because I feel like any team without a $50 million quarterback in that situation is lining up under center and running the QB sneak, and the Eagles do have a $50 million quarterback, and they do that anyway. So it's obviously a play that works. Burrow has been successful at it in his career. Very, very frustrating that those were the 2 plays they called in that situation, but I think the question that everyone's asking right now is what now? Where are we? What's next? What happens? Before we get into that, we do have a $10 super chat from JQ over on YouTube. Says, Deion Sanders said that Bengals ownership doesn't want to win championships. They just want to be in the conversation, and I believe them. Interesting. I might believe him too. I heard a fun story years ago from David Fulcher, a safety on those Bengals Super Bowl teams, that said on the bus back from the stadium to the team hotel after the 2nd Super Bowl loss, he was sitting behind Mike Brown, and Brown said, "We can't keep doing this. It's too expensive to fly the families out here." So if that's the immediate thought of the ownership after a Super Bowl loss, I can't imagine how they feel about being competitive right now with an expensive quarterback. So certainly sentiment that I think is shared by most of Cincinnati. One thing I do want to touch on right before we get into the outlook for the rest of this season, a lot of people in the chat saying that this game proves the importance of T. Higgins. And I think that's absolutely true. I also think Friday proves why you might not re-sign T. Higgins. He continues to be banged up and miss time. This is a guy that's played 55% of the snaps on offense since he got drafted, and he's going to want top wide receiver money. I just don't know how much I can talk myself into this. This was a year that he had to be healthy and play all year long to prove that that was something he can do. He's already missed 3 games.
We just got done talking about how this organization as a whole is very cheap. To expect them to go out and spend $25 million a year on a guy who gets hurt at practice on a Friday and misses a game for, I believe, the 3rd time in his career now is what I saw, that he's gotten banged up at practice and missed time with a soft tissue injury. Find it hard to believe that the Bengals are going to make that move. And it goes back. We got a super chat earlier in the day from JQ, a $5 super chat. It's because they, as an organization, are cheap. Always has, always will. If I was Joey B, I would ask to be traded.
Wow. Let's not put that out there. Let's not put that out in the world. Jeez Louise, guys. I mean, it's a tough loss. I get it. But, man, don't take Joe from me. If you take Joe from me with this team, what do I have, Craig? What else is there? Oh, man.
Well, I mean, you're talking about the quarterback that carried you to a Super Bowl. Yeah. Just 3 years ago. I mean, hard to imagine moving on from him if you can. But I mean, no, I mean the struggle though is continually the same conversation, and that is, can this Bengals offense operate without 2 stud wide receivers?
Right.
And I fully believe that, and don't take this the wrong way, but like the T. Higgins that you're getting for $25 million a year apparently would be replaceable when you're talking about a draft and other free agents. I mean, this is a guy with an extremely, extremely high quality skill set. I mean, big, physical, can go up and get the ball. And I believe that. I mean, he has the skill set to be an A.J. Brown type wide receiver. I truly believe that. The problem is he's continually hurt. And I struggle because the Bengals have yet to be able to figure out that number 2 wide receiver position when he's not out there. Andre Yoshivas with the drop today has continually showed that he's not necessarily ready for that role. When Mike Gesicki has to step and be your WR2, that's not a good scenario for Joe Burrow as a quarterback. So either way, whether it's with T. Higgins or with somebody else, like the thing that I feel like is very obvious is that you can't go into 2025 without a top end wide receiver 2, but you have so many holes in so many places that you need to plug that I don't know how you go about addressing it, because you can't afford to draft a wide receiver in the first round either.
Yeah.
Because you have so many other needs. So it's one of those catch-22 situations where, okay, let's say you don't tag T. Higgins again and you don't sign him to a long-term contract. Well, then you're going to go into the draft and you're going to have holes that you have to leave wide open because you can't draft it in the first round, because quite frankly, you have so many other places that you need to help. And so you're either going to draft your wide receiver 2 and hope that you hit on a wide receiver again, because you've been fairly lucky with that, or you're going to go out and address the needs on the defense. And quite frankly, if we're being honest, one thing that might make an impact on that is who's your head coach.
Yeah,
because with
absolutely.
Zach Taylor, he'll absolutely go out there and spend a first round pick on a wide receiver again. He's done it time and time again. But if you go out and you hire a new head coach, maybe he doesn't.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It's very clear to me that this offense needs a second wide receiver. And I see someone in the chat right now saying, how many top wide receivers does Kansas City have? It doesn't matter how many top wide receivers Kansas City has, because Kansas City has Andy Reid. If you give Zach Taylor Kansas City's offense, Patrick Mahomes is nothing.
Right.
Because he can't do it. But if you give Ben Johnson this offense, I have a lot more confidence that he's going to make it happen.
Without a T. Higgins.
That's ultimately what it comes down to is, okay, do you want to continue to invest in the players and have to give Zach Taylor 2 star wide receivers in order to be successful and hope that they all stay healthy along with Joe Burrow? Or do you want to go out and try and get somebody like Ben Johnson, who has shown so much creativity offensively in being able to find ways to create open receivers and to get defenses out of position? He did it again today. I think David Montgomery had a touchdown pass to Sam Laporta today. So, I mean, it's just frustrating when you look around the league and you see so many different teams who have found ways to make it work without that top end talent. And then we, with Zach Taylor, have that top end talent and can't make it work offensively. So no, you're right. If you have Andy Reid as your head coach, you probably don't need top wide receivers. But if this Bengals team, who has not shown historically that they're willing to move on from head coaches, expect to be competitive, then they're going to need another wide receiver. And to Jade's point, they haven't even paid Jamar yet.
Right.
So
yeah, absolutely.
I don't know.
No,
you're not going to sign them both this offseason. So are you going to go out and tag T again and leave Jamar playing his final year of his contract without an extension? Can't do that. I don't know. Just so much frustration. And to the point of what now? I think you get what you can at the trade deadline and see if anybody has interest in T. Higgins.
I would absolutely explore that, because you have to figure out what you have. And I don't know what they're doing with Germaine Burton at this point, but he needs to be playing, because we have to figure out if he's a decent piece for this team or not. Because if he's going to go out there and put up stinkers week after week, then that's fine. I would rather see that than see him sit on the bench and do nothing. Andre Yoshivas went out there and ran cardio today for 60 minutes. Nothing from Yoshivas today. Jermaine Burton had 3 targets, and one of them was a 50-yard bomb. He has 2 catches on 5 targets this year for 88 yards. How is that a guy that you can't work into this offense more often when we consistently see Yoshivas and Trenton Irwin not be able to get it done consistently? I mean, these guys don't do it at wide receiver 3, and certainly when you ask Yoshivas to step up to wide receiver 2, he hasn't been able to do it this year in the games T. Higgins has been out. It's been abysmal from the receivers outside of Jamar Chase in games without T. Higgins. Every single game T. Higgins hasn't played in, Mike Gesicki has been the second leading receiver. That is unacceptable. These guys have to step up if the Bengals don't want to use one of those premium picks on a wide receiver and don't want to change their head coach. We don't have a guy in this lineup right now, or in this roster right now, that I'm confident in being a wide receiver 2 next year.
I know you and others slammed me for my pregame comments about Jamar Chase, but if you take away that touchdown, I mean, that first drive was basically his entire game.
It was.
Because if you take that away, I think he ended up with like 4 catches for 20-something yards, right? So, I mean, I will fully admit I didn't take my own advice. Jamar Chase is in my starting lineup in fantasy football. Go. So, like, take that for what it's worth, right?
It's a little easier said than done to bench him.
100%. But the truth of the matter is that in the games where T. Higgins has not played, coming into today, Jamar Chase was not great.
Yeah.
Against New England, 6 catches for 62 yards. Against Kansas City, 4 catches for 35 yards. And now today, we go up against the Eagles, and Jamar Chase, he reels in 9 catches, but only 54 yards. And again, I just feel like it's because time and time again, Zach Taylor doesn't know how to scheme open a wide receiver
right
in these kinds of situations. And so if you're going to expect T. Higgins to be gone next year, you got to figure out how do you get Jamar Chase open more downfield, because throwing screen passes is not going to get the job done. And I get it. He's great in open field and he's really good at challenging against tacklers and all of those things with, speaking of Jamar, but I just, when he's the only one out there and he's blanketed by 3 different guys, it just doesn't make any sense to have only one guy. So I ate my words a little bit with that first drive, but I think the rest of the game showed exactly what my concerns were in terms of Jamar Chase and this offense not being able to scheme the wide receivers open when they don't have those 2 ideal weapons.
Yeah, and it's just such a tough place to be because, like you've said already, like we've talked about so many times, there are so many other holes on this roster right now that being forced to use either a lot of money or a top draft pick on a wide receiver is just a tough place to be. But I think the question everyone's asking right now is, are we dead? Is the season over? And mathematically, the answer is no. But the question is, do you believe in this team to be able to beat some playoff teams at some point this season and win some home games at some point this season? If the answer to that is no, then I don't blame you, and I'm not going to talk you out of it. But mathematically, the Bengals are absolutely still alive in this thing. You're 3-5 now after the loss at home to the Eagles. You have the Raiders next week, a chance to go 4-5. Then you go to Baltimore with a chance to claw back to 500. You've dug yourself another big hole here, but you have a chance to beat 2 teams here and get back to 500 before another easy stretch of games. I mean, you're probably only going to be underdogs in 3-4 games the rest of the year, and you can only lose 2 of them. You have to go 7-2 to make the playoffs, we think, the rest of the way. So in order to get to 10 wins, it's certainly an uphill battle, and you're going to have to beat every single team that you're supposed to beat, and that's a game like today, where you were 2.5-point favorite at home and you're expected to take care of business, and you don't. You get blown out by 20. I'm going to choose to believe
the insane
they still have
the insane
life.
part is you're only a game out of the playoffs.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Even with today's
the AFC
loss,
is
you're
just
a game
so
out.
bad. They're gonna drag me along.
Right? That's exactly the thing. As a team, I have very little faith.
Yeah.
I just don't have faith in them right now. When I look at the schedule, I agree with you. The Raiders next week should be a winnable game. But the Ravens, and right now what I'm looking at, the Ravens is a loss, the Chargers is a loss, the Steelers is a loss, the Cowboys are a loss, Titans are a win, Browns are a win, Broncos are a coin flip, and then the Steelers are a loss. So when I look at it right now, my gut wants to tell me that we're going to finish the season 3-6. But I also know that the AFC is terrible, and that if they can find a way to just win 2 or 3 of those coin flips, that they might get in.
Yeah.
With a 500 record.
I think there's going to be an AFC playoff team with 9 wins, which is crazy to say after last year and the year before, talking about how elite the play in that conference is and how a 10-11 win team's going to get left out. To be talking about 9-win playoff teams this year in the AFC, maybe teams plural It's crazy to say, but certainly a reality when looking at the standings and how a lot of these teams are playing right now. But the Bengals 1-3 conference record. That's why I keep saying that 10 wins is necessary. I just don't think you're going to have that conference record tiebreaker with anyone if you're sitting there at 9 wins with a bunch of other teams. So the Bengals are going to need that 10th win, I think, in order to have a chance. And then even then, you are really just rooting for a lackluster season from the entire conference and then magic in the playoffs from Joe Burrow. That's really what we've resorted to at this point. I don't have any faith in this defense against playoff offenses. And spoiler alert, in the playoffs, that's who you play, is playoff teams. So I don't think it would go great if we got in. And then how far away are we, Craig, from having the conversation of, do we want to get in? I think we're still a few weeks away from that, but it's certainly something I've thought about.
I mean, I feel like this team is just going to meddle its way to a 500-ish record. Mm-hmm. And at that point, you might as well get in and try and have some fun.
I do agree.
Like,
unless you're going to lose like 12 games.
Yeah. Okay. So let's take the scenario that I just played out where the Bengals win 3 of their remaining 9 games and they end the season
6-11
at 6-11. The way the AFC is going and the way the NFL is looking this year, like that might still put them like in the 10 to 12 range in terms of drafting. What good does that do?
No, 100%.
I might as well draft 18 and be in the playoffs and try to get a little bit of momentum going. No, this is the problem, right? Like on paper, you are good enough and should be in the playoffs. But the way you are playing, especially defensively, is nowhere near that level. And so it's one of those situations where like my gut and my brain are not on the same page. And like I want to believe that this team can turn things around and can start winning football games. But then I also look at what I'm seeing on screen and I'm seeing a Bengals team who just can't beat another team who's any good at all.
None.
And so it just I said we needed to win 5 straight for me to be all the way back. I'm not all the way out, but I am certainly not back.
No. Well, you said we had to hold the Eagles under 20 points. They had 37.
How'd that work out? You
I was trying to haggle you down to like 21.
21 and a half.
It's 37.
Okay. You got it. You got it, Jacob. 21 and a half it is.
Craig, we were trending the right way. We had 2 real fun weeks.
Were we? No,
wins.
We didn't.
Wins.
Stop it.
Wins. Wins are fun. Wins
every
are fun.
Time you get on this show, you say, "Oh, we're winning. I'm back. We're in a good mood." And then you ask me, "How we feeling?"
Yeah, you tear me down.
Jacob.
And you tear me down always.
Realist.
I know you are.
I'm a realist. You take your optimism,
and that's why this works. You drag me back down to earth.
Truth. You face the truth, Jacob. This is not a good football team. And whether you want to say it's because of the talent on the field or the talent in the booth making the play calls, I don't care what you want to say it is. The truth of the matter is that right now, top to bottom, coaches, players, front office, ownership is not a good enough team to consistently be a playoff caliber football team. We had our 2 runs to the AFC Championship. Listen, I've been alive for 37 years now, Jacob, and I've seen 3 Bengals appearances in the Super Bowl. 2 of them I don't remember because I was too young. I remember 2 AFC Championship playoff runs, and those were both in the last 5 years. So at this point, I've just got to be happy that I've gotten what I've gotten, and I'm just going to go back into the same mindset that I've had with this Bengals team for the last 30 years, and that's just expect mediocrity. You know, the first 10 years of my life, we were trash every year. We were lucky to win 3 games. Then we got Marvin Lewis, and I loved Marvin Lewis for bringing us to mediocrity because we had been so bad for so long. And then we finally get rid of Marvin Lewis, and we bring in Zach Taylor, and he takes us to the Super Bowl, and I'm like, holy cow, this Bengals team is back. And then they just continue to show me that this is the same old Bengals team, the same old Bengals front office, the same old. And here I am again in my pessimistic, everybody hates me because I speak it how it is, It is what it is, Jacob. You can go and you can look at this team and try to act like there's positives to be had, and maybe there are. But the truth of the matter is that my expectation is continued the same way it was every year under Marvin Lewis. If we can make the playoffs, it's a win for the Bengals, because other than that, it's just who we are.
That's a shame if that's the reality, because it certainly feels like we have a wealth of not average players, not mediocre players, which was usually the thing with a lot of those teams is, okay, well, Andy's at quarterback. That's mediocrity there. The O-line, mediocrity most of the time. The run game, mediocrity. The defense, mediocrity. It seems like we have pieces that are great. Pieces that are the best in the league in some cases. And to still be facing that mediocrity, I think, is why it hurts so much more now than it did back then, because it's so hard to justify. There's just no reason the team should look like it does right now. And like you said, it very much falls on absolutely everybody. And yeah, see it in the chat. The Ravens loss makes this loss hurt even more. Absolutely right. If the Bengals were able to pull this one off against Philly at home, you'd be sitting really pretty right now. Basically, that slow start wouldn't have meant a thing, and you'd be back on an even playing field. But you lost by 20.
Rick just brought it up. Duke Tobin's been with the Bengals for 25 years as the head of player personnel, or whatever his title has been for 25 years. How often do you see that in the NFL?
No.
Not very often.
Right.
And the only reason that Marvin Lewis even came back for the last couple of years of his stint with the Bengals was because the Bengals agreed to start giving him a little bit more control over the roster.
Yeah.
It just we're not getting into it. We're not getting into it, Jacob. I can't do it today. We can't do it. I'm trying to have a good, positive Sunday. I refuse to let the Bengals refuse to let the Bengals. No, I refuse to let the Bengals ruin my weekend. They did exactly what I expected them to do. You wanted me to extend it to 21.5, 37 out the window. It doesn't matter. But if we didn't even score 21.5, I should have asked you, okay, if I give you 21.5, are the Bengals even going to win that game?
I would have said yes. I definitely would have said yes. Doesn't get much more frustrating than this one. Good old-fashioned butt whooping at home for the Bengals against the Eagles. Chaotic post-game show, but I'm not sure what you expect with that kind of product from the Bengals on the field. This is then what you get. We'll be much more buttoned up and clear thinking on Tuesday. Well, I don't know about buttoned up. That's not usually what you get here at Chatterbox Bengal, but much more clear thinking on Tuesday when we come back to break down the film and everything along those lines. Break down this 20-point loss as the Bengals fall to the Eagles, 3-5 now on the year. Las Vegas next week as the Bengals, that was weird, many years. Las Vegas next week as the Bengals face the Raiders before they head to Baltimore for another divisional matchup. Bengals fall in what felt like a must-win game. Certainly hurts quite a bit. For Craig Sandlin and Jacob Tissett, that's going to do it for today's post-game show. We'll see you guys on Tuesday.